Hello, everyone. I had to fight OBS a bit to get us here, but here we are. It's the end of 2025, and with each year, when the end comes, also comes the SOTYs. I think this is the third or fourth annual SOTYs. The SOTYs, as you can tell here, is the stuff of the year stream. I could not tell you why stuff of the year stream was the idea that came to mind, but I continue to find it funny, and so it has stuck. Which means that today we are going to do a, a a bit of year in review, and I'm going to give out some awards that are not me being really very serious, but I am being genuine, right? I don't expect that me handing out one of these awards, which comes with no actual certificate or anything, but is just a note of my admiration. I don't expect that to move the needle in any big way. There's some stuff that I want to shout out. Mostly it's a way of framing the year and talking about some important things that happened or that I did over the course of the year. I love stuff. Stuff is great. It is good to have stuff to think about and to enjoy and share with people. So, for the folks who have not watched a Stuff of the Year stream before, what you can expect is kind of this PowerPoint type Google Slides deck where I will talk about some games that I enjoyed, some other things that were important in my year. I'm going to talk at the top about kind of Daggerheart launch year stuff. And then I'm going to do some awards. And then toward the end, I'm going to talk about some not great things that were really hard this year, and which is why we have this content note for US politics and pet illness death. I will flag again when this is going to happen, so that if that is not something that you're in a place to hear about or chat about, which is totally okay, you can dip out from the stream, and I will flag the time stamps in the video when it goes to YouTube. So it should be really easy to jump ahead or to skip past that section if that is something that is going to be useful to you. But these things were a very big deal in my year, and so I'm going to talk about them because to ignore them would mean intentionally omitting some pretty important stuff and big things that have happened in my life over the course of this year. But we're not starting with that. I just wanted to give this preface so that folks understood why I have this note here. That content note does not yet apply because today we're going to start with the special award for thing that dominated 2025 and changed my career trajectory, which is Daggerheart, right? Daggerheart officially launches in the full version on May 20th of this year. I was an additional designer on the game. Additionally, I was an additional designer on the Daggerheart Quick Start adventure, also known as the Sable Messengers. I was a lead designer on Marauders of Windfall, which was released during the beta, has not been re-released for the final edition. It may be at some point. That is really very much up to Darrington and what plans they want to have. And then I was a co-writer on the Daggerheart homebrew kit, which was released around Gen Con of this year. And so a lot of the work that I did on Daggerheart was in previous years. So the thing with 2025 is more Daggerheart coming out and Daggerheart being in the world and people reacting to it and engaging with it, and then getting to share my perspectives on the game, my guidance and encouragement and tips for playing the game, and my process and approach and ideas about developing new things to use with the Daggerheart rules using the community gaming license stuff, right? Speaking in an unofficial capacity, just as somebody who knows the game really well and loves it, versus speaking kind of with the voice of or for Darrington, which I basically only do when they tell me to. because that's how this works, right? I'm not staff at that publisher. I was a freelancer. And so I'm not going to speak with that company's voice unless they say, Mike, speak with the company's voice in this regard, right? You are empowered to do so. So the game coming out was obviously a really big deal. The night before, so May 19th, I posted a I'm going to see if I can find it. Yes. I posted this I made this post on Blue Sky, which was the idea for this hit me yesterday because my brain is in Daggerheart anticipation 24/7 right now. So excited to see and hear people receiving their copies, and I can't wait to talk more about the game tomorrow, which is the shot from Muppets Christmas Carol where Kermit/Bob Cratchit is looking up at the shooting star. The line in the song is "There's only one more sleep till Christmas." Right. And then in this graphic, I have, after all, there's one more sleep till, and then I have the Daggerheart logo at the bottom of this image because I was very excited. And much like many people, especially little kids who are excited for Christmas and cannot sleep very well, I don't tend to sleep very well the night before big important things, whether that's an event or important travel or things like that. So we get to the day, I do my launch day stream, which is kind of a bit of like a potpourri kind of deal, where I'm just talking about stuff in general. But it's later that week when I do my stream about campaign frames, and then I talk about adversaries and environments. And over the weeks of summer, right, between May and then especially again in August and later in the summer, where I'm able to more regularly do these videos and share my thoughts and publish some community generated material using the CGL. There was this amazing response from people who are excited about Daggerheart, people who are playing the game, people who are running the game, where folks were very excited to hear what I had to say about the game, right? Even speaking with an unofficial voice, getting to share how I thought about and how I approached the game. A lot of people have said that it helped them understand the game, that it helped them develop material for the game, it helped them GM, it helped them feel confident GMing, and having that intensity and tenor of response, right? Not just a lot of people talking about the game, but a lot of people talking about the game and a lot of positive feedback for my work on the game, and then the videos and other materials that I was making, sharing my perspectives on the game, made a really big deal. It was a huge thing in my year, and it's hard to convey the full breadth and depth of what that all is and meant, because it's something that has kind of been with me and been an everyday thing since the game came out, and since I've kind of reached this place where I'm doing the videos and publishing stuff on Patreon, and there's this feedback loop, right? Where the game comes out and it sells out, and then there's a restock and it sells out, and then there's a restock and that sells out. And we get to Gen Con, and so many people are excited about Daggerheart, and lots of people are talking about it and eager to know what's going to happen next. And, you know, I and a bunch of people go to the showcase panel where the Darrington staff announces a bunch of things, and they have Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins come on stage, who had just joined Darrington, talk about the things that they're going to do for the game, and just 6+ months of rolling excitement as different things are announced, as stuff is released, as there's more discussion, as then Hope and Fear is announced and pre-orders start, and a bunch of other things. So it would be extremely remiss for me to not spend some time talking about this as a year of Daggerheart for me. And I can be I wouldn't say totally certain, but I think that getting to share my thoughts about the game and having there be such strong feedback is part of why I am where I am now, where I'm working on the Dungeons of Drakkenheim Daggerheart campaign guide. I have a fair amount of other freelance inquiries that are coming in that I'm trying to figure out whether I can balance with what I have or send those folks to other people who I am confident in terms of their being able to do the kind of work. I'm being vague here because this is other companies and sometimes there's NDAs involved and sometimes they're not, but I don't want to blow up anybody's spot. That the game has launched this strong and that I've gotten to benefit personally, both in an emotional, on an emotional level and on a professional level as a contributor to the game and getting to share my perspectives and having that be seen as really valuable and getting that attention means that my professional life is now very different, right? My career in TTRPGs is very strange, and many careers in TTRPGs are strange because it's an odd industry. But right, I go from doing a video about the Candela Obscura quick start guide in 2023 to consulting on Candela, doing writing for Candela, and then that fall getting the contract to work on the Daggerheart core book, working on the Daggerheart core book across much of 2024, and then having the book come out in 2025 and that leading to this other big project. It's a pretty quick ascent in the field, right? Going from consulting on a thing and doing a little bit of writing to being a very involved designer of a major release to then being lead designer of a new version of an acclaimed adventure guide in Drakkenheim. That kind of trajectory does not happen all the time. I would say it's pretty rare. I have a lot of advantages coming in, right? Not just more traditional stuff like being white, being perceived as masculine / a guy, even though I'm not because non-binary, right? Having already built connections as an author, having an experience, all the experience of having been an author, having worked in trade publishing and knowing the business of publishing, having played TTRPGs since I was like 9 years old, having done my master's thesis on TTRPGs, right? There's a bunch of factors that made it possible for me to go to where I am now in TTRPGs. Hello, Jota Pe Korvuja. Apologies at the mispronunciation there. That is almost inevitable. Thank you for joining. I'm just talking about kind of what Daggerheart and Daggerheart's launch has meant to me this year on a like professional and personal level, and then I'm going to talk about some other things that were fun and exciting or just important in my year. And so, to recap, if there is one word that would describe, or I would use to describe the thing that had the biggest impact on my year this year on a professional level, it would be Daggerheart, right? The game coming out, engaging with the game, building on the game, talking about it. Thank you so much for catching a stream. This is going to be less focused on Daggerheart. This is more of like a year in review, but I hope you'll hang out and chat about maybe things that you've enjoyed this year or just hear about some of my other thoughts. And then I'll hope to catch you on another stream that's a little bit more kind of traditional Daggerhearty stuff. So that's all of that. Just putting this lovely cover here. And thank you for the follow. Thank you also to Alex Yershov for following earlier today, and Roguish Owl 83 for following a few days ago. Now we are going to move on to the more traditional-ish awards, right? Where I have nominees and then winners and things. So We're going to start with best game to play with your spouse while the world continues to be bad. This is a category I introduced either last year or the year before to talk about video games, mostly, that I played with my wife, Meg. Getting to play games together means less of me poking at the internet, less having to engage with what's going on in US politics, when the amount that I need to engage with it is pretty limited, because a lot of stuff I can't have an impact on, right? I can act locally, my money can do certain things, but what this award category is meant to focus on is things that and types of experiences with Meg that have helped refill my well, have helped bolster my spirits, kind of keep morale up over the course of the year. And these are not the only 4 games that Meg and I played together this year, but they are some of the ones that stand out the most. Motorsports Manager here is a little bit of an outlier because I don't watch motorsports, nor does Meg. We played this game because the folks at Remap, which is folks who formerly worked at Waypoint, Rob and Kato, they streamed Motorsports Manager, and then Meg and I watched those streams and were amused by those streams. And then when Rob and Kato kind of reached an off season with Motorsport Manager, I saw that the game was on sale. I told Meg, hey, we can just buy the game and play it ourselves. And so we did. And we played a few seasons of one of the categories, and we poked at a couple of other things. We haven't played in a while, but there for a few months, not just watching Motorsports Manager, but playing it was a big fun thing that was a way for us to get to spend time together. Blueprints is another game along those lines. Blueprints is very engrossing because it's a puzzle game on top of, or it's a puzzle game and it's a roguelike. It's not quite a deck builder, even though you're building the pool of rooms that you can draw from, so it's sort of deck buildery. But it has enough different kinds of elements that Meg could be excited about certain things, I could be excited about other things, and we could still enjoy the game together, which is really cool. A trick with Blueprints is that there's so many additional layers that we got to the point where I'd kind of experienced all that I wanted to, because the amount of extra time it would take to dig down those extra 2 or 3 layers was just not what I was interested in spending on the game. And so we kind of ran out of momentum with Blueprints before we finished. Peak, we have only ever played really as a single player game. We play it as one person is playing the game and the other person is cheering them on / strategizing, because we don't have a setup to be able to do private room online co-op, the 2 of us, just because of our situation. Like, we would need either another Steam Deck or we would need to get Meg a Steam account. Like, it's just not how things are set up for our gaming life, which means that we played it as a single player thing. And we've watched some multiplayer of Peak, but engaging with it single player is also interesting because it means that we have a kind of different experience of the game than a lot of people have, because for a lot of folks, it is a social game because it's largely designed as one. And then the last one of these nominees is a game called Tiny Bookshop, which I've been following for a little while since it showed up in probably some game showcase. I don't remember which one it was. I'm very glad that you got to play Peak. In Tiny Bookshop, you are a bookseller who comes to a small, probably European town called Buxtonbury. You have a kind of car trailer tiny bookshop, and you stock that bookshop, and you take your tiny bookshop to different locations around the town. And there's different books of different genres, and you get asked for recommendations, and there's these characters that you get to know and you get involved in their lives. And it is a lovely, kind of cozy business sim kind of game. And because it's books, right, there's a special connection for me as a writer and as somebody who worked in book publishing. We enjoy playing the game a lot. We reached credits slash end game, where you can keep playing the game kind of as long as you want, but there is an arc of narrative that we reach the end of, and I'm very fond of all of that that's in the game. It's very cool to be able to find or hear about games that are not just a little bit off the radar, but are maybe even a bit more off the radar, right? Because a lot of there's a lot of chatter this year for the Game Awards about like, what does indie mean? Like this this company, this game had a budget of $15 million. Is it indie? This company had a publisher. Is it indie? For me, that inclination toward finding stuff that is indie, I frame as finding work where one more person engaging with a game or a project and then talking about it a bunch because they're excited could have a meaningful effect on somebody's material reality, right? If I buy Tiny Bookshop and I talk about how amazing it is, and then 5 more people buy Tiny Bookshop, somebody might have the money to be able to, buy something nice on a grocery run. This is easier to do when I'm engaging with something that has like a single creator versus a studio. But for smaller games, word of mouth is the strongest thing that they have going for them, or the strongest thing you can do for them. And so I take that upon myself as a reminder to be vocal about the games that I really love, especially the ones that are more off the beaten path. Yeah, and thank you so much, Jota, for subscribing with Prime. I appreciate the support. So, best game to play with your spouse while the world continues to be bad. The winner is Blueprints by the studio Dogubomb. There's so much cool, fun, interesting, clever stuff in Blueprints that I definitely recommend it to anybody who likes roguelikes. If you like any number of subsections or elements within different parts of like the puzzle game genre, it is probably worth watching like 15 to 30 minutes of a video to see if it might be up your alley. Blueprints is a little tricky to recommend and talk about because there's so many mysteries and secrets. And depending on your first like hour of experience with the game, you may or may not get to see some of the things that for me make it the most special. But the way that I try to talk about it is to suggest that it has all these layers, to talk about the fact that it was this thing that my wife and I would talk about, would theorize about. We, took a notebook and we're taking notes in, and one person would be playing and the other person would be taking notes during the run to try to make a particular thing happen. So if you're looking for that kind of sit at home and play together or play on a Discord call or something like that kind of experience, I definitely recommend checking out Blueprints, and I'm glad that the game seems to have been really well received in general, because that hopefully means that that creator will have the means and the support to build on the game or to make something else to kind of continue developing their style and their perspective as a creator and designer. Next, we have the Turbo Tango Award for Best Roguelike Deck Builder of 2025. I did not play as many roguelike deck builders in 2025 for whatever reason. Some new ones were released, as we can see here, but I found myself more frequently just replaying Slay the Spire / Slay the Spire Downfall. I played only a tiny bit of Monster Train 2. I played, I think, the demo, And in that demo, there was a new leader character for an existing faction that I did not really vibe with. And so I have not gone back to Monster Train 2, even though I quite liked Monster Train 1. The visual style is not my favorite, but I think it is pretty notable. And the mechanical design of Monster Train 2 is really what caught my attention more. That it wasn't just a knockoff of Slay the Spire, it was branching out in some different directions. There were some different elements in terms of structure, right? Because you picked a major faction and a minor faction, and that impacted the types of cards that you could get access to. And you had these hero characters that are kind of your, they're not in your deck. They're just, well, maybe, I guess they can be in your deck, but usually you play them to begin with. And so Monster Train 2, I got to engage with some. I'm going to want to play more later. As We Descend, I played in demo, and then I don't know that, maybe it's in early access now, but I was interested enough in it that I just got it when it was available commercially. And As We Descend it's still roguelike deck builder, but there's this kind of a little bit of like city management strategy stuff involved, where you move back and forth between the city layer, where you are allocating resources that you've gotten from your delves and using kind of a separate set of cards that are those resources and other things to get more stuff and to refine your deck that you use when you then go and delve. I've played a fair bit of As We Descend, but I reached kind of a ceiling on, or a floor on how far I could descend. I haven't reached the point where I've unlocked enough things or I've reached enough mastery to be able to kind of get past that road bump or that roadblock. And especially in the demo, less so in the more recent editions, I ran into some technical hiccups. My computer that I'm doing this on was built in March of 2020, like right before stuff closed down in Baltimore for the pandemic. And so I know that stuff is getting a bit more long in the tooth. Some of that is on the system, but some of it seemed like maybe the game had some optimization stuff that the team needed to still figure out. So I was hoping for a little bit more from As We Descend, and I think part of that is just down to me not sticking with the game and getting over those speed bumps. I think there's more to it. I like a lot of the elements that are in it. I definitely want to go back to it, and I'm happy to kind of spread the word about it for folks who are interested in some of maybe the combat deck builder elements. Aesthetically, it's kind of a science fantasy, last city trying to survive, but then they have to descend to get more resources. Like, there's some interesting world building stuff going on and really cool visuals. The art style, I think, is pretty fun. It's not just yet another fantasy, like European fantasy kind of story. There's some other stuff going on, right? This mask is kind of a little bit emblematic of that, and this armor has something going on here. I played a bit of Drop Duchy, mostly the demo, and it reminds me in some ways of Carcassonne, the board game. And I like Carcassonne, but I'm not a super fan of it. And I think with Drop Duchy, I was never so excited to play more that I went to the Steam store to buy Drop Duchy versus other games that I already had, versus looking at different things that were coming out in the future. And that, I think, is mostly down to a personal taste thing, where I saw stuff to admire in Drop Duchy, but engaging with the loop was not as fascinating and exciting for me as I imagine it is for a lot of other people. What I did get this year was the Slay the Spire board game created by Contention Games, which is a really ingenious reinterpretation of Slay the Spire as, right, in this other form, as a board game. Roguelike deck builders, I think are a really great match for video games, especially in all of the ways that a digital product can tweak and adjust and do math for you in a way that would be much harder with physical materials, right? You can upgrade or change cards. You can add and subtract cards really easily, right? There's a bunch of things that make Slay the Spire a really good video game that if you just directly translated them to a board game wouldn't work. Well, the Contention Games team, as designers, put a lot of thought into what is cool and exciting about Slay the Spire and how can we use tools of a physical game to give an experience that presents and engages with a lot of that same fun. So I bought the game, I brought it home. There it is still set up in my game table, right? I got one of the tables where you have the game layer and then you have like the top layer for it to be a dinner table, where I set up a game, got a few acts in, put it away. I will go back, engage with it more. There's a lot to do. I had been playing it as a solo game. I want to play it more with other people because that teamwork element is such a big difference between the video game, which is single player, and the board game, which can do up to 4 players. And then I know that the Slay the Spire Downfall Kickstarter as a supplement expansion or maybe like standalone expansion for the Slay the Spire board game is coming soonish. I saw like a preview copy being demoed at PAX Unplugged, but didn't get to play it myself because they were very busy, which is good for them. But I have been playing Downfall on, the video game and really enjoying it. In fact, just like this week or last week, the Downfall development team added another character, another playable character, because in Downfall, you can play as basically the bosses of the game and you can fight on the Spire's behalf, right? So it's kind of an inversion of what Slay the Spire is, where you're these people who come from outside who are trying to conquer the evil of the Spire. Instead, you can play the bosses who are protecting the evil of the Spire. The narrative part in Slay the Spire is not super important. I think from what I've heard, narrative stuff may be more important in Slay the Spire 2, but it was fun to see that Downfall is still getting new material, or that there was one other thing that team wanted to add to the game, and I've been engaging with that, right? Getting to play this new character who I'm still wrapping my head around. So a few of these are a little bit different, right? It's new material for an old game. It's the board game version of a thing. It's things that I kind of bounced off of a little bit. Nothing super emerged as a traditional video game roguelike deck builder to capture my attention in the way that something like Balatro did. So for this year, the winner of my Turbo Tango Award for Best Roguelike Deck Builder is new stuff for Slay the Spire Downfall and just playing more of Slay the Spire Downfall, right? Where I'm giving credit here both to Megacrit, the original studio, and Table 9 Studio, the team making Downfall. So thank you to both of those teams for creating a thing that has that I've played over 1,000 hours of original Slay the Spire combined with Downfall over the years, and it seems like it should honestly be more because it is just a thing that I frequently go to. The way that I describe it to friends is that it's a way that I defrag my brain, right? It's something that takes some attention and focus, but is not too demanding on me if I just want to engage with it, right? If I want to win and beat the heart, right? That's a harder thing. But if I just want to play the game and go through the cycles and interpret and analyze stuff, the game is there. I know it well enough that it can be more of a relax and de-stress kind of a thing there. And it's been a year where that's been very important. So thank you to Megacrit and Table 9 Studio and Contention Games, everybody involved with Slay the Spire stuff. I am very excited for Slay the Spire 2. More on that later. Okay. Next, this is not quite a Game of the Year award. This is just a special award for a video game that I really enjoyed this year. Not genre specific, just kind of catch as catch can. So we've got some returning games here: As We Descend, Blueprints, Tiny Bookshop. I was really eagerly awaiting Silksong. I played and quite enjoyed Hollow Knight. I did not 100% Hollow Knight. I did not 108% Hollow Knight, because there's kind of a level of engagement with many games that I reach and I feel satisfied, right? Like I've gotten enough out of this game that I'm fine to move on. And with Hollow Knight, kind of just beating the game and playing a tiny bit of the DLC stuff, that was enough for me. Unfortunately, with Silksong, I reached that point of saturation, satiation, frustration before the end of Act 3. I got to the end of Act 2, finished Act 2 one way, opened up Act 3, engaged with some of it, and then I came to this set of bosses for whom I reached the point with these bosses, or trying to get to these bosses, that it was so much more frustrating than it was fun that I decided to just stop playing the game, right? I reached the point where that difficulty curve to satisfaction, the math was no longer mathing. And that's a me thing. It has nothing to do with, this is me not poo-pooing the game. Team Cherry had very specific design objectives. They designed, to the best of my knowledge, very much the game they wanted to make. And I'm happy that they got to do so. I think it's a really cool game. I wish that I had more patience, or that I'd figured out some of the boss stuff a little bit better to be able to get through more of the game without reaching that point where I just was frustrating myself. And that's not where I need to be, especially this year. And then last, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 came out much earlier this year. I had been following it since it was first announced, probably at like a Summer Game Fest or a Game Awards. Turn-based RPG, interesting art style, mysterious plot stuff going on, cool magic. There were a lot of things that got me intrigued about Clair Obscur Expedition 33. And then I played the game, and not an hour in, the prologue of the game comes out with a gut punch. And the narrative elements of the game, I think, are the ones that are going to stick with me the most, including things like the astonishing soundtrack composed by Lorient Testard. Combat was really cool. I'm excited for Clair Obscur Expedition 33 to be an example of an exemplar for turn-based combat RPGs, and that we're going to get games emulating Clair Obscur in the future and trying to like chase that, which is interesting because Clair Obscur is chasing a certain era of Japanese RPGs, right? The game director, or one of the leads, specifically thanked a lead developer of the Final Fantasy games in an awards acceptance speech at the Game Awards. And so we get this back and forth as games are riffing on games that are riffing on things that have come before. I will note that the Sandfall Interactive, the team that made the game, engaged. They tried out generative AI for like visual stuff, decided they didn't want to use it, but left a texture in the game such that when the game launched, there was a generative AI, at least like one asset in the game, that they then removed within a few days. One, your QA should have caught that. Mostly the people who like keep track of this is what we're doing in the game should have been more rigorous. So bad on you for that. It's probably not your individual QA tester's fault. I'm glad they decided that Gen AI is not for them, because if the game had been chock full of it, I just wouldn't have played it. And I'm pretty sure that the game would have been worse. It's a very good game. let this be a lesson. You do not need to use those terrible slot machines. If you have a specific and clear creative perspective, you can still break out. Sandfall Interactive had a lot of advantages as well, but Silksong is the second game after an amazing breakout success for a small team. These breakout successes do happen. They are rare. They may be the exception that proves the point that it's hard to break out, but there are a lot of people who focus on and put their attention on trying to find games outside the mainstream and expand that range of what people are going to engage with. And something like Clair Obscur Expedition 33's absolute domination of the Game Awards, I think, can be taken as a signal that there's excitement for and demand for stuff that is not just more of the same. Because that's certainly what I'm interested in, stuff that is reinterpreting, reevaluating, iterating in new ways on existing traditions and design styles. So my special award here goes to Clair Obscur Expedition 33 with this note of, hey, Sandfall, do not use Gen AI on anything else ever again, right? You said it wasn't going to be for you. You screwed up in leaving that thing in. You got a slap on the wrist, rightfully losing those awards that have a clear, that have the clear policy on, like, if you have Gen AI in your game, you cannot be considered. You've gotten plenty of acclaim. The game is a huge success. You don't need it. You are better than that, literally. And to other studios, you don't need it. If having it makes your game better, get better at making games. Okay, moving on. 2026's game of 2025, aka games I have not played enough yet and want to play more of next year. So we have Monster Train 2, which I talked about earlier. As We Descend should probably be on here as well. Let me go ahead and do that. Surprisingly, I did not finish Citizen Sleeper 2 Starward Vector. I think part of the trick here is that Citizen Sleeper 2 was a little bit more traditional of a game, right? You go when you do quests and you go to different sites. Citizen Sleeper 1 was really constrained and special because of those constraints. And Citizen Sleeper 1 was, right, the introduction to this setting. And now Starward Vector builds on what was already there, and it's doing really cool and interesting things. But one, I wasn't streaming Starward Vector the way that I streamed the original Citizen Sleeper. And so I didn't have that external impetus to keep playing the game. So I want to go back, finish up my run of Starward Vector. Ideally, I'd like to play through at least one more time because I think there's a bunch of stuff that I've missed. And I love the first game so much. I want, I think the world of these games, and I want all the best and more for Gareth Darian Martin, the kind of creator and lead developer of the Citizen Sleeper games. I want them to have all the resources they need to keep making games the way that they want to make them, because the stuff that that I've played of theirs has been really special. Tactics and Citizen Sleeper on your list as well. I just started playing Evilist Chronicles this last week because my wife got it for me for Christmas. And I had played the original Final Fantasy Tactics in college, and it made a big impression on me. And it's been very fun to play that game again with this new translation and the new voice acting, where it, for me, still captures a lot of the elevated tone and elevated voice of the writing of the original translation into English that is really memorable. But it has all these elements where it is kind of made new again, right? It's not a total from one remake. It's like remaster plus. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but I'm really liking it, and I want to do more with it. Death Howl is a deck builder that's not a roguelike. It is a tactical combat Souls-like deck builder set in like 5000 BCE Denmark / Scandinavia, where you play as a mother whose child has died, and she goes into the spirit world to try to bring her son's soul back, to bring him back to life. From pretty early on in the game, I feel like the game is communicating that that's not going to go well, but the visual style of pixel art and the mood that it creates, and the fact that when you're playing the game, you have these 4 different regions, and in each region there is a distinct, basically, color or set of cards. And if you use cards from a different region in that region, they cost more. And what this does is it incentivizes you to build a deck for each region using that region's cards, because you're getting that efficiency in cost for the cards. You can use cards from other regions, and that creates a lot of options for versatility, but it means that you can go to a new region, engage with it a little bit, figure out some stuff, go elsewhere, gather resources, craft cards for that region, and you can kind of basically do circles and weave throughout the setting in a way that is really productive, and there's like good positive feedback loops in that, which is why I've played probably 20-ish hours, but I've only beaten one of these 4 regions, and I'm very happy to keep going, though I may reach my like fall off point before the end of the game, depending, right? It has some difficulty spikes with certain bosses, but I have not fallen off of the game, and I'm excited to play more. As we descend, Citizen Sleeper 2, Death Howl, Monster Train 2, right? I haven't bought it. I probably will at some point, but I already have way more games than I can play, and so I'm trying to be really judicious about when I buy new games and what I buy, noting that I try to support games outside of like the AAA ecosystem where I can. Final Fantasy Tactics is not outside of that ecosystem, it's very much in that ecosystem, but Citizen Sleeper 2, As We Descend, Death Howl, right? They're not the big games of the year for most venues. And so the fact that they are my big games makes them feel more special to me. So Death Howl gets the nod here. The developers are The Outer Zone. I think it's their first game. But if deck building combat games are up your alley, and especially if you like tactical games, right? So Jota, you might take a look at Death Howl and see if the parts of tactics that excite you overlap some with what Death Howl is doing, to see if it might catch your attention to get to after, right, playing Tactics or Citizen Sleeper 2 or anything like that. Okay, we have a few more categories, and then we're going to talk about some more life stuff. Next, this is very different. Favorite K-pop group. My sister helped get me into K-pop probably 4 or so years ago now by recommending a few groups that she was excited about. I think including Twice. I started like watching and listening, right? Most of my engagement with K-pop is having music videos and performance videos up on YouTube while I'm doing other stuff. And as I went, what I found was that there's K-pop that I enjoy because the dancing is cool, but the stuff that I come back to more and more and more are the groups where I find the vocal performances more impressive. And so the groups 50/50 and NMIX are a couple of the groups that I've found where the singing and the vocal chops of the group are high enough to keep me really impressed and to keep me coming back to listen again and again and again. Those that don't know a lot of my family history may not know that everybody in my family are singers, right? My little sister got a degree in vocal performance. She teaches music. My parents met doing like show choir together, and then musical theater stuff. My dad taught directing. So like I have a performer family background, and I sung in choirs when I was a kid. I was in an a cappella group that was very casual in college. And so while I have done dancing and show choir and like that kind of choreography dancing that's closer to K-pop stuff, though not nearly at as high a level, the vocals are just going to be the thing that stand out to me, that connect with me more emotionally, because I know enough more about singing and have enough more training that I can appreciate the nuance and the heights. And that's just my personal perspective. Huntrix is in here because K-pop Demon Hunters was one of my favorite things of the year, right? Huntrix, the group, doesn't really exist. The singers, EJ, Ray Ami, and Audrey Nuna, right? The three of them have performed Huntrix songs, mostly Golden. I'm hoping that they will like record new music and perform as a trio, even if they're not performing as Huntrix, because I like them as performers, and I find it especially exciting to see performers getting to excel within the K-pop world who are not who like let's be frank, like they're older and they look different than a lot of K-pop stars, right? EJ is very tall for a K-pop star, and right we've got Korean American creators, and EJ has this background as a songwriter and producer, and it's a fun story. There's a lot of things to complain about in the K-pop world. I'm not super versed in all of them to the degree where I'm the person who you want to ask about them. But a lot of the bad things are bad things that show up in music industry elsewhere, right? It's concentration of money at the top, it's exploitation, it's bad contracts, it's stuff like that. And so I try to focus on engaging with K-pop stuff at the level that is good for me, which is kind of watching stuff on YouTube as I've described, and occasionally poking at some more things. NMIX, for me, of these four groups, has the highest overall average vocal performance. I think that 50/50 is good. The vocals in the current version of 50/50 are good, but feel much more like younger, more junior singers to me than NMIX. Some of that may come down to personal preference. I think that the highs of the vocals for NMIX are higher than the highs of vocals for almost any other group I've listened to, though I will note I've not listened really like exhaustively. If there are K-pop groups that you listen to that you think have really amazing vocals, I would love to hear the recommendations, because it's always fun to find new music to get excited about. So I give my tip of the hat here to NMIX, who is they're a JYP group. I'm going to take a drink here. Okay, now we move on to most anticipated 2026 RPG that I didn't work on, right? The thing that of course I'm excited about the Drakkenheim book. How could I not be? Here I'm focusing on things that I didn't work on, right? Work by colleagues or work by other folks in the field. So this is a kind of a longer list. I'll go through these maybe a little bit quicker. A couple of these, Ambition and Morksol, are games by folks that I am kind of in designer community with, right? I'm in at least one Discord with them. We've hung out at conventions, right? These are games by friends. I have met and hung out with the designer of Starscape. It was a couple of years ago now. I'm still excited for Starscape. A lot of games have been delayed because of tariffs and uncertainties around printing costs and imports and things like that. And so some of the games on this list were also on my list last year, where I'm still anticipating them. Ambition is a multimodal game where there's kind of rule sets for each of a few different modes. It engages with tarot and Taoism. The creator, Yanni, is a really exceptional artist and kind of brings art to the project and an artist's eye. And one of the things that is really fun for me about RPGs, even if I don't get to play them, is just engaging with them as art objects and works of inspiration, where a good RPG book will inspire you to think about fun you could have. And that, excuse me, that is useful to me even if I never get to play the game, because I then take that inspiration and I pull it into other things. Apocalypse World Burned Over is the third edition of the landmark, generationally influential RPG by Vincent and Mackay Baker. Burned Over just finished its crowdfunding campaign like a week ago or so. I got to GM like a 2-shot of Burned Over a few years ago using an earlier draft, but I have not gotten to play the current version, so I'm excited to engage with that when it's actually out. Merc Soul is a science fiction flip and burn kind of spaceship oriented RPG. It is not a Borg, right? Cyborg, pirate Borg, but it is Merc, right? Merc being dark, right? So this is Dark Sun. And it is some of that same aesthetic, but in a somewhat different science fiction-y kind of space compared to something like Mothership. This game Merc Soul is by 3 designers who are the kind of co-owners of Infinite Citadel, which is a RPG co-op. I've gotten to hang out with each of the 3 of them to varying degrees on the Discord and elsewhere. Their campaign for Merc Soul finished earlier last year, but Ambition and Merc Soul are part of one of the things that I want to do in 2026 is play more games by people that I already know, right? Engage with the work of colleagues so that I can better support them as colleagues in talking about their game to other people. Starscape is a kind of like space opera crew relationship driven found family kind of a game, which is super up my alley. I just haven't gotten to play yet. The final version is not out in print version yet. Sword World is a really popular and influential Japanese tabletop role-playing game that is getting a English translation, which is supposedly releasing in 2026. So I have not gotten to read any of this English version yet, and my Japanese is now atrophied enough that trying to read the Japanese version would not be very useful, but I'm excited to see it when it comes out. This year it was announced that the Tomb Raider TTRPG that Evil Hat was producing with Ray Nedjadi as lead designer was canceled because Evil Hat and Crystal Dynamics, who own Tomb Raider, mutually agreed that it wasn't working. We then heard that Evil Hat was going to try to take what they had developed, remove the IP elements, and reinterpret it as its own game. I love a lot of this, or basically everything of Ray's that I've engaged with, I have thought is really amazing. I think he is a very sharp designer in terms of designing for emotional response. Apocalypse Keys and getting to play Apocalypse Keys for Speculate still stands out as a major highlight of my RPG experience in the 2020s. And so I am hoping, fingers crossed, that in 2026 we see whatever that new form is. I would guess that we would see a new announcement, a playtest, a crowdfunder, possibly just the announcement and the crowdfunder because there was already a playtest, but I would guess there's going to be another playtest because of having to redo things. So I'm excited for that. And then I am still excited for The Between by Jason Cordova et al., published by The Gauntlet. I have gotten to read through the PDF of this new edition, but it's much easier for me to internalize RPGs if I'm reading them in print. And I'm especially interested here because the Carve from Brindlewood mystery system that was developed initially for the Between, the earlier version, but then largely developed in Brindlewood Bay. And kind of the version in Brindlewood Bay is the version that I think became the baseline that was used elsewhere and now in the new version of the Between. In this version of Mysteries, the GM does not have a solution for the mystery. The GM has a bunch of prompts and tools and clues and moments and kind of plays responsively to what the players are doing. And then the players are actually the ones who, in engaging with the mechanics and tying together clues, theorize an answer to the major questions that exist in any given mystery or kind of a plot line in a Carve from Brindlewood game. It's a very player-driven approach to mystery, and it's one that I've gotten to engage with a little bit in Apocalypse Keys and in playing a two-shot of the Between. I think it's really fun and interesting, and I want to get more time with it because I think I may even want to fold it in or try a version of Let's Go Steal an Ending, the Genrenauts RPG that uses that approach. No promises. It's just a thing I'm thinking about. So, oh, well, that doesn't work because that moves this thing. Let's put this back here. Okay. So, most anticipated RPG that I didn't work on, as you might have guessed, is still The Between. I am excited for a lot of these other ones, but the Between is the one where getting to engage with it more may be most likely to impact how I approach game design on existing or new projects. And so that's why it's kind of at the top there for me. Next we have most anticipated video game. Video games get delayed a lot. Slay the Spire was supposed to come out in 2025 in early access. It didn't. They moved it back. Early access is supposed to start in March of 2026. Fingers crossed that happens. We'll see. These other anticipated games are mostly on the bigger end because a lot of independent games don't get the airtime to be announced at big shows. They get announced at smaller showcases. They just come out and then they spread by word of mouth. And so this list that you see here is much more like AAA top heavy because those are the games that I've heard about. I will expect, excuse me, that when we have the 2026 SOTYs, Slay the Spire will probably be award nominated if the game has come out in early access. My other favorite games may not be on this list, right? They may be other games from smaller publishers and smaller studios that I don't even know about that then catch my interest. That doesn't mean I'm not interested in these games, right? Star Wars Zero Company is supposed to be a tactical game, and I do like a good tactics game. Saros is the new game from Housemarque is the name of the studio. They did Returnal, which was an earlier PS5 game. Pragmata, the visuals look really interesting, and there's like this co-op element where this little girl who's an android and you do real-time hacking, and that is interesting. Onimusha, I'm mostly interested in because the folks at Remap have been replaying, or they replayed the first Onimusha game, and getting to kind of follow through on that with them engaging with the new game could be fun. And then Phantom Blade Zero is one of what feels like a growing number of high fantasy action games developed in set in and often developed in East Asia, right? So this is wuxia, it is chanbara, it is shanxia, it is East Asian high fantasy action, Souls-like maybe, character action maybe. It feels like there's a groundswell of games in this style, and so there's a bunch of them, and it's hard to keep track of them sometimes because a lot of them do have a pretty similar visual style. part of that may just be that even though I have an East Asian Studies degree background, some of the nuances in different subtypes of approaches on the style are close, like they're just stuff that I'm not as familiar with. And so some of that is going to be probably on me. And some of it I think is just that there is something of an emergent common style within those studios in the way that there is kind of an emergent common style among American and European studios for a lot of genres. And that this is just one of those things that happens. And so that's all those. Slay the Spire 2 is still the most anticipated game for me because the first Slay the Spire is an all-time favorite. And from what I can tell, the second game is everything you like about Slay the Spire, but more. And so, of course, that's going to be exciting. Next we have, this is something that folks who have been started watching me this year are probably more excited about, which is special award for cool Daggerheart creations. Because I work in this space, rather than having a list of 5 things and then giving an award to one of them, I'm just highlighting all of these projects because each of them in different ways I think is cool and exciting and speaks to / suggests different parts of what's happening in Daggerheart creator communities and fan communities that I think is cool. So I'm just going to gush for a little while about people making stuff with Daggerheart. First, we have the Bureau of Chronological Affairs by Dungeon Club / Jack Panic. And this is so there's a campaign frame and custom character material. Jack Panic is kind of building out what seems like it's building toward like a larger project with the Bureau of Chronological Affairs that's using Daggerheart, but there's so much custom design that it's kind of at the degree of what we might call a hack, where it's really taking the game in a different direction and presenting a lot of new approaches, but in some ways that I think are really pretty interesting. So I want to shout that out here. Go and check out itch.io and look at all of Dungeon Club's Daggerhearty stuff. If you get the Bureau, make sure to then also go and look at the Agent Class Pack. Jack Panic / Dungeon Club is known for really design forward, like graphic design forward stuff. But in Bureau and in a couple of other things, I think Jack has some really interesting perspectives on core elements of Daggerheart design. And so I'm excited to see kind of where that goes. And I want to play a Bureau of Chronological Affairs game, right? This is inspired by Control and Triangle Agency and the TV show Loki and the TVA and things like that. And the idea of getting to use the duality dice system, but for something that's really different, is fun. And to me, signals that there's enough excitement and interest in duality dice / the Daggerheart system on the design level that we're then seeing these projects that are taking it more far afield in ways that are exciting for me. Yeah, glad you liked BCA. I haven't gotten to give it as much of a full read through, again, because I process material physically more easily. Yeah, the game loop stuff is very exciting, right? I love a good procedural game. And so I'm excited about this. Part of the trick is that I run 2 Daggerheart games a week and I play in a third game, and I want to play other games, but then I also want to engage with this additional Daggerheart material. One of my Daggerheart games is the Drakkenheim playtest, and I kind of need to be doing that to develop the Drakkenheim book. And so one of my challenges in 2026 is how many games can I play / run, and how will those games help me with my different plans? So we'll see how that goes. I also want to shout out Pistol Heart by Carlos Cisco. Carlos and I worked together on Daggerheart. and have gotten to chat about game design and kind of become more friendly colleagues over the last couple of years. Sorry, I'm going to try to get you a link that's better. Here we go. So Pistol Heart is the first of a series of modular supplements for Daggerheart, right? Using the community gaming license to support a Western genre campaign. Carlos and I are both credited designers on the Colossus of the Drylands campaign frame, which is a weird Western with giant monsters, right? Kaiju type creatures. Because Colossus of the Drylands is not in the SRD / is not public game content, we can't make, and we as anybody who isn't Darrington can't make stuff specifically for Colossus of the Drylands. But what Carlos has smartly done is made material for a Western campaign. Well, Colossus is Western, so it's compatible while not infringing. And in that first supplement, there are 5 subclasses that are like Western themed subclasses for Daggerheart. There's some gear, there's some environments, and Carlos is really cooking with the stuff in Pistol Heart. He's shared some upcoming things with me, and I just want to reiterate to folks that if you are interested in Colossus of the Drylands, if you're interested in a Western influenced game, or if you just want to see some ideas of where people are going with design for the Daggerheart rules, keep your eye on Pistol Heart. There's going to be volume 2, I think Carlos has said, in the first quarter of next year, and there's supposed to be like 3 or 4 parts in total. You can already get the first one, and it is currently, It is currently on sale for 34% off. It's normally $15. It's $9.90 right now. So there you go. A late holiday gift to yourself, perhaps. Okay. Nope. Okay. So this next one is a little tricky because this is like, it's on Many Worlds Tavern's Patreon, but you can also get it free, I think. Many Worlds Tavern is a company that creates mostly tea and coffee with like fantasy themes. And I'd seen them at various conventions where they also sell merch, and right, they sell like coffee mugs and water bottles and things. But this year they started getting into designing Daggerheart compatible stuff. And I heard from Darrington folks that Many Worlds Tavern had published a campaign frame. I went and I got to talk to one of the kind of co-creators at PAX Unplugged. Was very nice, sent me away with some of the cool like cards that they've made as promo items along with their existing material. Yeah, Remnants of the Coast is free. I couldn't go back and find the link directly to that frame when I was putting together my materials earlier today. I also really like the caravan aspect, Jota. Yeah. So Remnants of the Coast is a new campaign frame that they published for free. You should still be able to go get it, where we have there's kind of 2 civilizations that used to be in close contact, and a calamity has kind of separated them. And now, as the calamity has kind of faded, you play as part of a caravan that is attempting to re-establish connection between these 2 nations, these 2 civilizations. And what it does is adds new mechanics for your caravan, giving the caravan its own character sheet and having caravan specific events. And your caravan has stats, and it's a really focused, thoughtful campaign frame that does one of the things that I think campaign frames are coolest for, which is expanding the game mechanically within a thematically specific effort, right? This is a game about travel in a camp and a caravan. Here's the rules for the caravan. This is that frame that I talked about wanting to smoosh together with the details of our escape, which is this RPG by Possible Worlds Games, which is also about like a caravan and traveling group. So Many Worlds Tavern has said they're going to release a campaign frame every quarter, I think is what they said. Don't quote me on that, quote them. But every quarter is what I last saw. And so we should theoretically see a new campaign frame from them early in 2026. And I am certainly excited to go and check that out when it comes. I would also love to play around with these caravan rules on my own, right? I bet you could probably take the caravan rules and Pistol Heart stuff and make them kiss and play something like that. Caravan and Bureau of Chronological Affairs might be a little trickier, but I bet you can do it. And then the last thing I want to shout out is just everybody making cool stuff for Daggerheart for their home games. This image down here is a Carry Injuries Untold Colossus miniature that somebody made for their home game, where there's little spots that you can put your miniatures on it, and people have made just the coolest stuff for their Daggerheart games, and it shows up on Reddit, or I see it on Blue Sky, right? Because I look for Daggerheart stuff to see what people are doing with it. This particular thing is created by Few Habit 6288 from a post on the Daggerheart subreddit. So I wanted to shout that out specifically since I like citing my sources. But this point is more general, me being delighted by and excited for folks in the community finding a way to share their own individual creativity because and as a practice of their excitement for Daggerheart, right? It is that feedback and that return of excitement and engagement from people out in the world who are playing the game that makes it so much easier and more exciting for me to keep designing stuff to support the game. Right? And that is true whether I am doing it self-publishing using the community gaming license, whether I am working for a publisher like Ghostfire on the Drakkenheim book, or, you know, some hypothetical future work for Darrington should that happen. So shout out to everybody doing cool stuff with Daggerheart in your home games, in your streams, in what you're publishing, all of that good stuff. Okay. This is a reminder, or now is the content note about US politics and pet illness and pet death. I will do a wave like this when we're done and we're going to move on to the last things, but I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about my dog, Oreo. This is Oreo the dog. This was a picture from April of this year. In the last couple of years, right, Oreo turned 10 and then 11 and then 12 this summer. Oreo, when pretty soon after we got him, and the vet here thought that he was like 4-ish, he had some limping, which turned out to be like a herniated disc. And so he had surgery to remove a herniated disc. And over the time that Oreo was with us, he had a number of surgeries, and very tough dog, a very good sport, even when he didn't like being kind of constrained for recovery. But he started slowing down. He had a seizure sometime 1 to 2 years ago, which meant that he would basically only turn to the right, and then started having some dog dementia, right? The same kinds of things that happens with humans, but with a dog, it's even harder for them to communicate what they need. And this year, things kind of got harder and got worse. And we kept trying to do what we could to make him comfortable, looking into options for medication, considering, if we do this, how much does this like what's the impact on Oreo? What's the impact on us that then makes an impact on him? And in the fall, we reached the point where we just did not see a way forward for him where there was much quality of life for him. And so we were able to have a doctor come to the house so that we could say goodbye to him here, especially because having had to do a lot of medical stuff, he got to the point where he was just always unhappy and anxious at the vet, even though everybody at the vet loved him and they treated him very well. But he was a dog, and he doesn't understand that when the people at the vet are taking blood, it's because they want to take care of you. And so we were able to have this doctor come to our house, and it was very emotional, as you may be able to tell, not just because I'm getting emotional now thinking about it, but for all of you who have had to say goodbye to a pet, or perhaps even more so, those who've kind of lost loved ones and been there for the kind of final decline from illness and things like that. So we are still very much feeling his absence. It is strange to be thinking about going into a new year without our little guy. We got Oreo in 2017, kind of the first year of the first Trump administration, from a rescue in, I think, Arkansas. And they had this system where they would hire a van and some volunteers would take the animals, they'd have a route going up to the northeast to drop the animals off with the people who were adopting them. And so when we kind of got the nod that we would get to adopt Oreo, they said, we are going to have Oreo at this truck stop in upstate Maryland, and you can pick him up at 6 a.m. on this Saturday at this truck stop / gas station McDonald's. And what we thought that was that was the first offer. And it was clarified to us that he was going to be there, and if we were not there to pick him up, somebody else would get to pick him up, and then they would be the ones adopting Oreo. So Meg and I drove upstate. It's not a terribly long drive, but we stayed in like a Motel 6 and woke up bleary at 5:30 in the morning. And then, at like 5:50, because they were a little early, this just happy little guy in a red collar with kind of white fur and black spots comes tromping around the side of the van. And we loved him from the very beginning. And he was a very good friend. He did not know anything about all the politics stuff. He did not care about it. Not that he wouldn't care, but it's just not a thing that dogs know about. He just wanted to be where we were. He wanted to schnorfel and tromp around. And we were very blessed to have him in our lives for as long as we did, even though it was not nearly as long as we would have wanted. And so that's politics in the US has been absolutely terrible, right? Genuine major turn toward fascism, deeper into fascism, because the US has already been extremely bad for a number of marginalized people, especially multiply marginalized people, right? If you are a queer immigrant of color, the US was already really bad. The US has a very bad history in a lot of ways, but for many people, myself included, the politics of 2025 have made a lot of things much worse. Having somebody to take care of in Oreo made it easier to not dwell on and ruminate on all the bad stuff that was in the world. I wish that we could have had an easier year to be the last year that we had with him, so that we would not already stressed by a bunch of other things. But I'm very grateful for the time that we had with him. I'm grateful to Meg for the time that she put into really going above and beyond in being primary caretaker for Oreo while I was working on write Daggerheart stuff or other games publishing stuff because I had freelance work coming in, and because she left federal work in January for reasons you might be able to read between the lines, and has not been able to find work that kind of fits her skill set since. The upside of that was that she was able to spend a lot of this time taking care of Oreo, and I'm very grateful for that, because if some things had gone different, it would have been much harder to make the time or to invest the resources to be able to take care of him over the course of this year, and we might not have had as much time with him, and that would be really bad. That would suck in different ways. But 2025, very bad in a lot of ways. I have done my best to pull back in terms of how much and how frequently I engage with and learn about all the terrible politics stuff, because again, a lot of it I can't do much about. And what I learned in 2017 through 2020 is that throwing hands rhetorically on the internet, fighting with people I don't know on Facebook, and even most of the time fighting with people I do know, doesn't really help in a broader sense, right? It helps sometimes individually because people who watch those arguments know that somebody cares. But doing that was very exhausting, and I don't feel like it had a lot of positive impact. And so I've not been doing that. Instead, I've been focusing on contributing and adding cool things to the world where I can, while being worried as things continue to get worse. Having Daggerheart to work on, having this specific thing that people are excited about and that there is positive energy about and in response to, was very, very helpful and very useful. But we still miss him. I was happy to get to share kind of stories about, pictures of, and some video of Oreo on Patreon and elsewhere. I'm very sad to not have those or have new stuff to be able to share there. I expect that we will welcome another four-legged friend into our family at some point, but that may not be for a while, because the hole left in our lives by Oreo's absence is still very big. So, moving on from that, thank you for sticking with me while I talk through that. And now we go on to, this is in the wrong order. Sorry, this was supposed to be like, see, here's bad things, and then, yeah, it's this thing. Anyway, moving on. Goals and ambitions for 2026, right? We had looking back. This is looking forward. The first, biggest, most obvious thing for me is that I have work still to do. I want to complete and launch the Dungeons of Drakkenheim Daggerheart campaign guide. The process is going really well. I'm very excited and very confident that we're going to end up with an awesome book that people are going to love using, running Drakkenheim, drawing from it for their own games, and other stuff like that. I can't really talk about specifics because it's NDA'd, but look for it. There will be updates for backers, as promised in the Kickstarter. And so some of that stuff that I've been working on, you will get to learn about in the coming months over the course of 2026, as we go toward the release of that. And there will be times when maybe I have a chance to share other stuff. And if that happens, you'll get to hear about it, and that will be cool too. Another thing that I am hoping to do next year is to find a publisher, right? Find and sign with a publisher for Let's Go Steal an Ending, which is the Genrenauts RPG. I have kind of come back to it during some of the lulls in Drakkenheim or other projects, or just as a way to bring my mind and my attention back to this project, right? Because I was working on the game, and then I started getting this work from Darrington and getting more freelance work in RPGs. And I spent a lot of time, really intense time, working on those games, mostly Daggerheart. And now I have a lot more experience as a designer, especially as a writer of RPGs, that I'm going to kind of bring back to the Genrenauts game. I am still very proud of that game. I think that it has a lot to offer. I think that there's stuff in the game that is a cool iteration on and like carries forward the design tradition of Forged in the Dark. And I'm hoping that I can find a good partner for it, probably for some kind of crowdfunding campaign and release in like 2027 or 2028, because that's how long the timelines are in making games like this. But I say goals and ambitions here. I think this is from my friend whose online handle is Unforth. Would separate goals and ambitions. Goals are things that you want to do that are largely under your control. Ambitions are things you want for your life but are not fully under your control, right? Find a publisher is not fully under my control unless that publisher is me creating my own publishing company. But it is a thing I want for my life for 2026. I tried to have most of these be goals rather than ambitions, because it's nice to have more of these things be under your own control. This is less specific, but I do want to keep getting better at making these streams and my videos about Daggerheart compatible material, my thoughts about the game. I'd love to develop a workflow where I can create shorts that are either excerpts or reinterpretations of stuff that I do longer videos on, because a lot of people find creators now through short vertical video, whether that's on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok. And I have found that the kind of the flow from these streams that I do to my Patreon to my game design work has been a great and very effective part of my game design business, right? I do these streams, people go, oh, wow, I like what Mike has to say. Oh, they have a Patreon. Let's go look at that. And they become a Patreon supporter and they engage there and they provide, kind of financial support for my work and get to engage with works in progress. And right, that is a really good approach, right? We might, if I had an MBA hat on, I'd be like, oh yes, this is this is a product funnel, something. This works. It's a good part of how I'm doing, how I'm kind of acting as a professional in the world. I like doing the videos. I want to do them better. This is a goal that definitely has some ambition elements to it, which is develop and launch my publishing plan for Daggerheart compatible projects. This is like a big picture. This is not just here are the individual things that I want to publish, but developing a good pipeline, developing partnerships with people who might be producers or art directors or layout artists, right? I'm building this network and developing my ideas and figuring out not just what I want to publish, but how I want to publish, because I want to put out Daggerheart compatible stuff alongside these freelance projects I'm doing, where the freelance projects ideally are, they're 3 to 6 months, they're bigger projects. They give me a strong baseline of income, and then I can add to that with my own self-publishing stuff. If the Daggerheart self-publishing was all of my income, it would be much more stressful. And what I learned self-publishing as an author is that while I can do a lot of these things that are involved in self-publishing, they are proportionately more straining for me than a lot of the other things that I can do. And so ideally, I find people for whom those things are not proportionally more straining, partner with them either for, a share of the profits, or paying them for their services and their skills, so that I can have a Daggerheart publishing plan that lets me focus more on the things that I'm best at, which is the design, the writing, and then talking about the work in a way that works for me and works for other people. I have been talking with a few different people. There's nothing that I can announce yet, but know that it is something that I'm thinking a lot about and I'm going to be putting effort into, so that especially for folks who are patrons, I can reach the point where I can provide more clarity and more consistency for you all as supporters on what you can expect, what is going to come, when it's going to come, and that material, when I publish it, is the best that it can be. And then last, this I've talked about a little bit already, I want to play more different RPGs, especially ones by friends, right? So that is playing Ambition, that's playing Merc Soul, that's playing The Beckoning Dream, and some other games by Infinite Citadel folks, and by other people at Gatebreak, this Discord community of designers and creators that I'm in, where I want to play more RPGs because engaging with the field more broadly and taking in a plurality of influences is a big part of how I have become the designer that I am. And so it's important to me to keep that up. And I want to play stuff by friends so that I can be a better colleague in supporting them and their work. Because I do really like hand selling. And I would love to hand sell works by friends at cons, even if I'm going to do that for like 2 or 3 hours at a time, instead of what I used to do at Angry Robot, which was be at the booth all day selling for 6, 8 or more hours in a day, largely on my feet. That just doesn't work for me anymore. But I do really love hand selling, and I love getting works by friends into people's hands, right? And hand selling is a great way to develop word of mouth. It's just very labor intensive for me, or in my perspective. And that type of labor, because it almost always includes being on a concrete floor in a loud room. And those are just more taxing, or more noticeably taxing for me than they were 5 or 6 years ago. Hooray for understanding how your brain works. Would I rather be able to do this for 8 hours without it being a problem? Yeah, but that's just not how life is at this point. And so it's a question of finding what I can do in the way that I can do it to then pursue these goals and ambitions, so that I can be in community and be a credit to the communities of designers that I'm a part of, and help build the field and get people excited about games and connect people with games that they are going to love. All that good stuff. So that is the Stuff of the Year stream for the year 2025. Some fun things to get to talk about, some sad reflections, but I have a lot to be excited about in 2026. Some stuff I can't talk about yet because that's just how life is, especially when you work in creative fields and there are NDAs and things that haven't been announced and all that kind of stuff. But I will share news, especially on Patreon, as I am able to do things, whether that is mostly publishing, but then, other things happen sometimes as well. Thank you to The Kids Are Asleep for hanging out, as well as Jote Pe Corvuja, and to Cloudion5 and Alan Tucker and everybody else who is here watching during the stream. And thank you to folks who are watching in the VOD later on. I expect this VOD will probably not be as popular as my more traditional Dagger Hardy stuff. So extra thank you to the folks who are watching and do engage with this to hear about my thoughts on the year and other stuff like that. I will be back next Wednesday with a more traditional Daggerheart RPG or RPG-ish kind of stream, and we will resume regular service as we get excited in 2026 for what is ahead. All right. Thank you all very much, and have a good, happy New Year. Indeed. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Here we go. Where's my ending? Ending. Here we are. Bye. you.